People think drowning is loud. It isn't. It's the quietest thing in the world. I know because I watched. What is the statute of limitations for a sin? I'm going to tell you something I've never said out loud. Not to the therapist I saw for 2 years. Not to my mother. Not to the detective who sat across from me with a face that said he already knew the answer but needed me to say it. I didn't say it then. I'm saying it now. My daughter's name was Oaf, 5 years old, brown hair that wouldn't hold a clip, a gap between her front teeth that she called her letter slot because she liked to stick her tongue through it when she was thinking. She could not say the word cinnamon. She said cinnamonamin every single time. I never corrected her. I should have corrected so many things. Her father, Ronan, was a deep-sea welder. Aberdeen, Scotland, a grey terrace house on a street called Rosemount Place. And if you think that name sounds gentle, you've never been to Aberdeen in February. Ronan worked oil platforms in the North Sea. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. He'd come home smelling like brine and metal, hands so rough they'd catch on the bedsheets. Oif would hear his key in the door and go absolutely feral, running down the hallway screaming, "Daddy, daddy, daddy," with her socks sliding on the wood floor like a cartoon character who can't get traction. He'd pick her up with one arm, like she was made of air. We weren't a love story. I should say that now. We were a got pregnant at 22 story, a moved in because it made sense story, a stayed because the kid was happy story. And those stories can be fine, because there's no illusion to collapse. Ronan was not a talker. He'd go days without saying 30 words to me. But he talked to Awaf, full conversations. He'd sit on the floor with her toy kitchen and have a 15-minute discussion about whether invisible soup needed salt. He'd read to her at night and do the voices, all of them, even the women, even badly, and she'd laugh so hard she'd get hiccups. I was a dental hygienist. I worked 4 days a week, and on Ronan's weeks home, he had Aoif. Breakfast, park, bath, bed. He was not babysitting. He was parenting, and he was better at it than me. I knew that. I never said it, but I knew it the way you know the thing you're most afraid of. The day it happened was a Thursday, July. Ronan was offshore. My mother was supposed to take Oifia, but her back had gone. She'd rung at 6 in the morning, apologizing in that Irish way that's half apology and half accusation, as if her own spine had personally betrayed both of us. So I called in sick, told the practice I had a stomach bug, kept Oif home. Here is the part where I need you to pay attention, not to what happened, to what I was doing while it happened. The house had a back garden, small, fenced, a rectangle of grass with a shed and a paddling pool, one of those cheap, inflatable ones, blue with yellow fish on the sides. I'd filled it the day before because Awifa had begged me with the particular terrorism only a 5-year-old can deploy. The water came up to her shins, 14 inches, not even knee-deep. I put her in the garden at 10:30. Swimsuit, sunscreen, armbands, even though the water was barely deep enough to wet her waist. I told her to stay where I could see her. I told her I'd be right inside, and I was right inside, at the kitchen table with my laptop. I was talking to someone, a man, not Ronan. His name doesn't matter. He was no one. A man I'd met on an app during one of Ronan's offshore stretches. Not because I was unhappy, not because Ronan had done anything wrong, but because I was bored. That's the truth, and it's small and ugly. And I won't dress it up. Ronan came home tired and quiet, and I wanted someone who made me feel like I was still a person someone would choose, not maintained like a household appliance. So I was typing, 10 feet from the back door, which was open. I could hear the garden, birds, a neighbor's radio, the distant motorway. What I could not hear, what no one ever hears, was the sound a child makes when water closes over her face. They don't scream. That's the thing no one tells you. In films, drowning is arms and noise and splashing. In real life, a small child slips under and the water barely moves. Their arms don't wave. Their mouth opens and closes, and the water fills it. And the whole thing happens in a silence. The birds don't even stop singing. I was typing a message about a restaurant. I remember that. A Thai place on Union Street. I typed the words, "The green curry is unreal," and I hit send, and I looked up and I looked through the back door. Aoife was face down in 14 inches of water. I don't remember running. I remember being at the table, and then I remember being in the pool and my knees were on the plastic bottom and the water was coming over the sides, and she was heavy in a way she had never been before. Wet wood. That's what she felt like. I turned her over and her eyes were open and her lips were blue and her letter slot was full of water, and I screamed so hard something tore in my throat. I didn't get my voice back for 4 days. The ambulance was there in 9 minutes. I know because I looked at the call log later, over and over, as if the numbers would rearrange into a different answer. They worked on her in the garden, on the grass, next to the pool that was still full. One of the paramedics was younger than me. I watched him doing compressions on my daughter's chest, and his hands were shaking. They got a pulse at the hospital. For 2 hours. Her brain had been without oxygen for somewhere between 4 and 7 minutes. They couldn't be precise because the only witness was me, and I couldn't tell them when she'd gone under. Because I was typing about green curry. She died at 3:47 p.m. I was holding her hand. It was so small I could close my fist around it completely and still see my own knuckles. Her fingernails had that blue tint that means the blood has already given up. Ronan flew home on an emergency helicopter. 12 hours. I watched him come through the hospital doors, still in his work trousers, his face a color I'd never seen on a living person. Gray, not pale, like someone had drained him from the inside. He walked up to me and said, "Where is she?" I took him to her. They'd cleaned her up. She was on a bed too big for her, in a hospital gown with teddy bears on it, and she looked like she was asleep, except for the color, always the color, that wrong blue-white that doesn't exist in the living world. Ronan sat beside her for 3 hours. He held her hand the same way I had. He didn't cry. He talked to her, quietly. I stood at the door and I could hear pieces of it, something about the toy kitchen, something about invisible soup, something about Daddy's here now, repeated so many times. It stopped being words and became just sound, just a man making noise, because the silence was going to kill him. The detective came the next day. Standard procedure for a child death. Sat at our kitchen table, same chair, and asked me to walk through the timeline. I told him everything. Almost everything. I told him I was inside. I told him I was on my laptop, doing some admin. He wrote it down. He didn't ask what kind, because it was an accident, because children drown in shallow water every summer, because there was no crime here, just tragedy. I wasn't doing admin. I was writing to a man who meant nothing to me, about a curry that meant nothing to me while my daughter drowned 10 feet away in water that wouldn't have covered my ankles. Ronan didn't find out about the affair. He found out about the laptop 3 weeks later. He'd gone back to work too soon, everyone said, but he couldn't sit in the house, couldn't walk past her room, couldn't look at the garden. He was offshore when he got access to the family cloud. I'd forgotten about the sync. He saw the messages, not the content, just the volume. Hundreds of messages to a name he didn't know, time-stamped across months. He called me from the platform. Satellite phone. There's a delay on those calls, half a second, and in that delay, I could hear the North Sea. Or maybe I imagined it, or maybe what I heard was the sound of a man putting together the last pieces of something he wished he'd never started assembling. He said, "I need to ask you one question, and I need you to tell me the truth, because I swear to God, Maeve." I said, "Ask." He said, "Were you talking to him when it happened?" I said, "Yes." The delay, half a second of the North Sea. And then he hung up. Ronan came home 4 days later, Walked into the house, went to Oif's room, packed her things into boxes, her clothes, her books, the toy kitchen, the swimsuit still drying on the radiator, because I couldn't bring myself to move it, and he drove them to his mother's house. Then he came back and packed his own things. One bag. He moved like a man on a rig mechanical, no wasted motion. I stood in the hallway. I said, "Ronan, please." He stopped at the door. Bag over one shoulder, car keys in his hand, and he looked at me. Not with anger. That would have been easier. He looked at me with a tiredness so deep it seemed geological, like something that had taken millions of years to form. He said, "I keep thinking about her in that water. How long she was there. How quiet it must have been. And I keep thinking, if you'd been watching even for a second, just 1 second." He stopped. "But you weren't watching. You were choosing someone else, and she paid for it." He left. The divorce papers came 5 months later. No contest. He asked for nothing, not the house, not the savings, nothing. He just wanted to not be married to me anymore, like I was a room he needed to leave. The pool was gone. I'd slashed it with a knife the week after the funeral at 2 a.m, on my knees in the wet grass, stabbing it over and over until it was flat and the water ran out across the lawn, and I lay down in it. I moved back to Ireland. Galway. My mother's house. The same bedroom I grew up in, with the wallpaper I'd picked at 14 tiny blue flowers on a cream background. I'm 31 years old and I sleep under a duvet my mother bought me when I was a teenager. And some mornings I wake up and for about 4 seconds I don't remember any of it. And those are the only seconds of any day that I want to be alive. I don't talk to Ronan. His mother sends me a message every Christmas. "Thinking of Oif today, hope you're well." And I reply with a heart emoji, because I am too much of a coward to write actual words to a woman whose granddaughter died, because I was bored. I still have the app on my phone, not because I use it, because I can't delete it, because deleting it would be the last thing, and I need something left to punish myself with. Sometimes I run a bath. I fill it to the top and I sit on the floor next to it the way you'd sit beside a person. I put my hand in the water. 14 inches, that's all it was. Our wife would be 8 now. She'd have lost the tooth gap. She'd probably say cinnamon properly. She'd be in school, making friends, annoying a teacher, coming home with paint on her sleeves, and stories I'd pretend to only half listen to but would actually memorize whole. She'd be 8, and I'd still be her mother. And Ronan would come home and pick her up with one arm and she'd scream, "Daddy." Down the hallway in her socks, sliding on the wood floor, arms out, running toward the only man who never once looked away. But I looked away, for a man whose name I can't even remember. And I will never stop paying for it. Not because anyone is punishing me, but because every time I close my eyes, I see her face through 14 inches of water eyes open, mouth open, quiet as a prayer no one heard. And I could have heard it. I was right there,